Hi guys, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to assemble my Easter egg basket. This is a two-piece basket with the grass bottom acting as your basket, or a bowl if you wanted. And then the decorative egg is the cover for the basket. You can also turn this basket into a lantern by using tissue paper to cover the cutouts, which I will show you how to do. And for lighting, you place tea lights inside the grass basket. In your downloaded folder, you will see two more folders labeled like this. These two versions are for Design Space or Cricut users. If you have a scoring tool for your machine, you will use the files in this folder labeled Yes Scoring Tool. If you do not have a scoring tool, you will use the files in this folder labeled No Scoring Tool. The files in the Yes Scoring Tool folder will create fold lines like this, and the files in the No Scoring Tool folder will create fold lines like this with these small dashes cut out. If you use a different machine than the Cricut and you do not have a scoring tool, I recommend using the files in the No Scoring Tool folder. If you do have a scoring tool, I would love to know how your machine handles dash lines for scoring. Do you have to change them like with Design Space? Please, if anyone can comment below on that, I would really like to know more about this with other machines. I do have a full video that goes into more detail about fold lines that I'll link below, and if you're new to the Cricut machine, I encourage you to watch it because it'll walk you through how to prepare your file if you're using a scoring tool. Once you've chosen the folder you're going to use, open it up and you will see two more folders and one PDF file. So if you have a scoring tool, you will open this Yes Scoring Tool folder, and in there you will see these two folders plus this PDF. And similarly, you will see the same division of parts in the No Scoring Tool folder. I've split up the basket into a bottom piece and a top piece. The bottom folder contains the parts for this grass basket, and the top folder contains the parts for this egg part. And these PDF files are purely informational. You do not need them for cutting. These are here to show you how many of each part to cut. So if you open up this PDF file in the Yes Scoring Tool folder, you will see this. So these are two different files. This one is in the basket top folder, and this one is from the basket bottom folder. And as you see here, I've labeled how many of each piece to cut. And notice here, if you're creating the lantern version of this basket, you'll only need one of this piece and one of this piece. And this is so you can use them to trace out the tissue paper, which is the paper that allows the light to illuminate through your basket. And if you open the PDF in the No Scoring Tool folder, you'll see the exact same information. The only difference is these shapes are colored differently. For materials for this project, you'll need double-sided tape and glue. If you want better control for spreading your glue, you can use a small paintbrush, but it's not crucial. And here's a look at what your cutouts will look like. Here are the parts for the egg. Here are the backing pieces for the egg. And if you're creating a lantern, your backing pieces will be tissue paper like this. And here are the cutouts for the basket bottom. The dark green pieces are the backing pieces. And if you're creating a lantern, they will be cut in tissue paper like this. Let me first show you the different steps you'll need to take for creating the lantern version of this basket. The first thing you'll need is to cut out a piece of this backing piece, like this dark purple one I have, to use as your template for the tissue paper. I'm using a plain white tissue paper. You can use colored tissue, you can even use acetate paper for this. And you will need to trace 6 of these shapes on your tissue paper. Then we will be cutting each of these shapes out by hand. Tissue paper can be tricky to cut, but this is a pretty easy shape to do. The one tip I have here is to roughly cut each shape out first to separate them. That way you won't be dealing with a large piece of tissue paper as you cut out each piece, because it'll be flopping around and you'll probably end up with a rip somewhere. Then once you have them separated, you can cut your trace lines. And here are my 6 pieces, which we'll set aside and come back to later. You'll also need to cut tissue paper for this dark green backing piece for the grass basket, and it'll attach like this. So just like the last backing piece, trace 6 of these grass shapes. Now these are a little trickier to cut, so I have another tip. First, just like the last piece, I'm separating all of the pieces first. Then when you go to cut your trace lines, when you get to these zigzaggy grass blades, make all the cuts on one side first, like this. I'll be moving along this way, just cutting the right side of each grass blade. Then go back and cut the other side to meet the first cuts. And this is to avoid having to navigate your scissors through these tight corners, which will probably end in some ripped tissue paper. And no need for perfect cuts here, just cut as close as you can to your trace lines. And you will need 6 of these as well, which we'll set aside. Now we can start assembling our basket, and I'm going to start with the grass basket. Here are my pieces for the grass basket. Remember, the dark green piece will be your tissue paper piece if you're making a lantern. One small detail I did with my basket. Here is the finished basket. This piece here is this part sitting like this. And for the piece beside it, I flipped it so it sits like this. Then for the next one, I flip it back to match the first piece, and so on. And this is just for some variation design-wise, no other reason. So it's up to you whether you want to do this with your basket. And now the first thing we're going to do is organize our pieces. I have my 6 pieces here, so I'm going to group 3 together facing the same way, then the next 3 I'm flipping over. And now we're ready, so the first step is make 3 folds. You're going to take each piece and make your folds like this, all down and away from you, which we call a mountain fold because it creates a mountain. And each piece will have 3 folds total, 2 at the sides and 1 at the bottom. Sorry for the blurriness here. And remember, I flipped these 3 pieces over, so now my dashed fold lines are on the other side and not as visible on this side. I'm still able to make my folds easily, but you may have to make your fold upwards and downwards to get a clean fold. Next, we're going to place double-sided tape on the 2 side flaps of each piece. A couple notes here. First is, after making this video, I went and widened these side flaps, so your flaps will be wider than what you see here, which means you can use a wider piece of tape. And just make sure your tape doesn't go past the fold lines. And that brings me to my second note, which is about the tape quality. This tape is not very strong, so if you need a basket that will hold together for a few days, I recommend skipping the tape and using glue. So if you're using glue, skip this part, don't place any tape on your side flaps, and move on to the next step, which is gluing the backing pieces onto these guys. Here I've finished attaching all my tape, and I've left these 2 flaps free from tape so I can show you later how to glue them together. So get your pieces organized again. Here are my 3 pieces with the tallest grass facing one way, and I'm going to flip them over. And here are the other 3 pieces with the tall grass facing the other way, and we're going to flip those over as well. And here's my dark green back piece, which you'll need 6 of. For this piece, you want to be working with the side opposite of where your tape is, or the side where your folded flaps stick upwards. And use this tallest grass point to match the 2 pieces together. So here I need to flip my piece so it'll fit. And you just come in with your glue. I'm using tacky glue for mine. You can use either tacky glue or regular white glue. And just place a bead of glue all around the edges like this. Then I'm adding a few small dots in between the grass blades. And now take your backing piece and place it on top, and you're going to position it so it sits along the bottom fold line and in the center of the two side fold lines. Then press down. And you can see here I've placed a little too much glue, but that's okay, it'll dry clear. Now repeat with the rest of the pieces. And if I take a piece from my second group, remember these will have my tall grass curve the other way, and just repeat the same gluing. And keep going back to prior glued pieces to press down on them again in case any of the areas start to come apart. And now let me show you the same step with the tissue paper backing. Here's the piece we cut out earlier, and you can place it first to get a sense of where it'll sit and where you need glue. Then apply your glue. For tissue paper, you can use less glue. Now attach the tissue paper, lining up the bottom edge with the fold line and centering it in that space between the side flaps. And if your tissue paper sticks out anywhere along the edges, just trim it off with scissors. And tissue paper will rip easily when it's wet, so flip this piece over to press the two parts together to avoid rubbing on the tissue paper. And after you've glued your tissue paper backings to all 6 pieces, you can move on to the next step. And here are our 6 finished pieces from our previous group. I'm organizing them again into the 2 groups for the next step. So first thing is to grab one piece from each group. I'm going to start with these 2 pieces that have the untaped flaps to make sure they go together. Down in this area, you should see 2 fold lines. On this piece, the fold lines are more visible on the other side, so I'm just going to give it a slight bend here to make the line more visible. And don't go crazy with this fold. These lines are just guides, so they won't actually be folded. And now place some tape on this edge here. And just make sure the tape is not crossing the guideline. Then you can remove the lining. And on your next piece, you're going to cut this flap off along the fold line. Then attach it right on top of the tape on the first piece, and here's where you use the fold line as your guide. So you line up the edge of the top piece to the fold line of the bottom piece like this. And keep in mind this space will eventually form a hexagon, so you want to line up these corners as well. And now you just repeat these same steps working clockwise, tape along this flap, and for my next piece the grass will face the opposite way. For this piece, I need to do the gentle folds again to make my guidelines more prominent. Then on this piece again, I'm going to cut off the left flap. And before you cut, remember to make sure this piece is facing the right way with the backing piece on the back. Now remove the lining and attach. Then you repeat this again for 2 more pieces. And when you get to the final piece, things are going to change a bit here. For this final piece, you're going to place a piece of tape here and a longer one here that will overlap these 2 pieces like this. Remove the linings, and for this last piece, we are going to cut off both flaps this time. And now that triangle should fit snugly right into this space, lining it up with the fold lines. And our base is finished, which is this part here. Now flip it over, and first we're going to fold all the flaps again. And you're going to have to lift the adjacent piece to make some of the folds. And just work your way around the whole basket. Now here is how you attach these together if you're using glue. Place some glue on 2 adjacent flaps. Then with my left hand lifting these 2 pieces together, I'm pushing them up until these 2 flaps come together. Keeping my finger on the back here to make sure that part stays flush. Then press the flaps together, working your way down the whole length of the flaps. And have a look back here, you can see how nicely these fold lines come together. Now with glue, you're going to have to keep coming back and pressing these together, especially if you're using regular white glue. These will want to peel apart as it's drying. Now when this is dry, it's going to be a nice strong hold. And if you're using tape, it's the same process. First, I'm removing all my liners from my tape. Then with each adjacent 2 folds, you're going to bring them up and press them together like this. Again, using a finger at the back to make sure they sit flush together. And work your way around until all the pieces are attached. And that's it for this bottom basket. Next, I'll show you how to assemble the egg. Starting with this piece, which will be the handle for the egg, fold it in half right at the narrow center like this. Then fold these flowery flaps upwards. Now open it up and apply some glue. I'm using tacky glue to these narrow lines. I'm so sorry about the blurriness. Then press the 2 sides back together and try to align them perfectly. And if you get any glue on this base, just wipe it off. And if you're using regular white glue that takes longer to dry, you should just come back to this piece and press it together again to make sure it hasn't peeled apart. Next, we'll work on our egg. Here are my cutouts, and here is the one cutout with the hexagon at the top, which is the only difference between this piece and the other pieces. All these side flaps are exactly the same on each piece, and the first thing you do is with these flaps sitting on the right side of the cutout, fold the flaps downwards. Do this to every piece. Now we're going to place double-sided tape on all these flaps. And try not to place your tape over that fold line. Place tape on all the flaps of your cutouts. For this part of the basket, you don't have to use glue for a stronger hold like with the bottom part. These will hold together with tape. And for the next step, we are going to flip these over. You can do this step starting with any of these, but I'm going to start with the piece with the hexagon. And here I have my 6 backing pieces cut out and ready. So this backing is going to attach to the cutout piece like this. If you're creating a lantern, I'll show you how to do that after this. And it'll be helpful to place your pieces together like this, making sure the backing piece edges aren't hanging over. Then you can gauge where you need to place your glue. For this part, I'm going to show you how to use regular white glue. Regular glue is more runny, so you can dispense some into a bowl and apply it with a paintbrush. And now just apply your glue all over this cutout piece. Remember, the backing piece doesn't quite reach the edges, so you can keep a small area clear of glue along the edges. And just work your way all over this piece. You don't need to cover every square millimeter, and just a general coverage will work. For my backing piece, the magenta is a 60-pound cardstock. You can also use text weight paper for this piece. And once it's covered in glue, attach your backing piece and press down. If your piece happens to stick out a bit on any edge, just cut it off. Press down to make sure all areas are glued together. Now repeat this step with the other 5 pieces. It's a good idea to keep going back to the pieces you've already glued together just to check that the glue hasn't come apart, and just keep pressing them together. Here are my finished pieces, but before we move on, let me show you how to glue on tissue paper backing. Here I'm spreading my glue for the tissue paper, and remember, you can use less glue for tissue paper. So I've finished spreading my glue, and another tip is to curve your tissue paper in the center like this, like a canoe shape, which will keep the end of your tissue from flopping down. Then position it on top and gently press down. And again, you don't want to rub the tissue paper too much because it will rip, so you can flip this over and press on the other side. Now repeat this step so you have all 6 pieces covered with your tissue paper. Set these aside to dry, give it a good 10 minutes or so, then we can move on to assembling them, which I'll show you with the pink panels we worked on. And here they are, nice and dry. First, take this piece with the hexagon top. You'll notice that this hexagon has some fold lines or dash lines in it that splits this hexagon into 6 triangles. We will be using these triangles as a guide on where to place the other panels. So to start, dot some glue on the 5 triangles surrounding the point of this attached panel. And again, I'm so sorry for the blurry video. Don't completely cover it with glue. You want to still see some parts of those guidelines. Now grab another panel and place the pointed end onto the first triangle like this, lining it up with the lines, and press down. And the important thing here is to make sure the point of your panel is aligned with that center point of your guidelines. Then grab another panel and place it on the next triangle. And it should sit right next to the panel before it with no space in between them. Now just repeat this for the rest of the panels. And once you have all the panels in place, keep pressing on them to make sure they stayed glued. And it's very important to let this dry completely before we move on. I would say give it a good 10 or 15 minutes, even more to be safe. And you may need to use something to hold this down to let it dry flat. Okay, now after you've let your egg dry, go around and just completely fold these tabs down like this. Then gently curve each panel inwards like this. And it might be easier to flip the piece over for this part. Now flip it back. Then for this final step, remove the linings from any 2 tabs like this and bring the panel beside it over and attach the bottom corner and edge to the taped tab. Make sure to line up the edge to the fold line and the 2 bottom edges. And press these together. Then move to the center tab and bring the 2 together. Be careful not to do this. You want to get a nice clean closure here. And you'll do this all the way around. Now for this last tab, I'm using my left hand inside to help me guide the two parts together. And here's your finished egg. And finally, in the last step, we are going to attach this handle on top like this. So cover the bottom of your handle with glue. Then align the direction of your handle with the lines of your egg. And just center it in that space. Be careful not to press down too hard. You don't want to crush your egg. Now wait for this to completely dry. And we are finished. Here is my finished egg basket, and notice these tabs from the grass basket act as holders for the egg. And since both pieces are hexagonal, you just need to make sure you align the corners and sides when you place your egg lid on top. And for the lantern version, I use these flameless tea lights, and if you want a really bright egg, you can fit up to 5 tea lights in this basket. Here I'm using 4. And that's it for this tutorial. Thanks so much for following along. I hope you enjoy this one.